Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, and I'm taking issue with Batgirl Redemption Road. Which Batgirl? Why the redemption? The answer to both takes us back a few years. No Man's Land was when Gotham was devastated by an earthquake and cut off from the rest of the country, and this is where Cassie Cain was introduced. At first, she was a mute teenage martial artist acting as Barbara Gordon's courier, but was eventually bequeathed the title of Batgirl. She was the fourth in the line historically, but the first to get her own solo ongoing title. That title lasted over 70 issues, seeing her try to connect with people and learn to speak through a metahuman deus ex machina. Who hasn't that happened to?
Well, we can all certainly understand that.
But she also protected Bloodhaven while Nightwing was away and found out who her birth mother was, Lady Shiva. She also found out she was a kind of chosen one for Ra's al Ghul's League of Assassins. By the last issue, she had decided to abandon the Batgirl identity and become a wanderer. And then came Infinite Crisis, then came 1 year later, and then the Dark Times.
Robin's title resumed, helmed by Adam Beechin. It was here that Cassandra returned, but she was leading the League of Assassins and now suddenly okay with killing. You know, the one thing she vowed never to do. Rumor has it this change was done so a new character, Charlotte Gaige-Radcliffe, would become the new Batgirl, because she was a teenage redhead and would thus evoke the nostalgic era of Barbara Gordon. Though it was extra pointless to do that, as Cassandra had already decided to stop being Batgirl before 1 year later. Turning her evil had absolutely no point. Bear in mind, Adam Beechin owns up to how he explained the evil Cass angle, but the idea itself came from over his head. Such is sometimes the nature of the comics industry. So, who ordered Cassie's turn? Beechin doesn't say, but given that Dan Didio humiliated him at 2 separate panels, calling him the man who turned Cassie Cain evil so the audience would boo Beechin, I have a good guess myself. Don't blame Beechin for the idea, is basically what I'm saying.
Charlotte's tenure was brief, and eventually, during Jeff Johns' run on Teen Titans, Cassandra was returned to normal. Thus, we have Redemption Road, a 6-part series focusing on Cassandra easing back into her life as Batman's ally and clarifying certain events to absolve her of wrongdoing. Sort of like a Greek myth. What's more, this series is also written by Adam Beechin, so perhaps this'll redeem more than just my favorite Batgirl. Now, let's see if this book will make us want to turn the page or turn our heads.
The first issue sees Cassie swooping in on the docks while she narrates her life story, reaffirming her vow never to kill, except where David, Kane, and Deathstroke are concerned. 2 men she finds in this 2-page spread aren't either one of those men, so she's only going to hurt them.
In that case, I think it'd only be fair if one of those guys looked like Dan Didio.
The cargo container has gun magazines, customized to her father's preference, meaning these guys may work for him. She breaks Beardo's nose with his own gun, somehow causing blood to shoot out several points of his nose, even through skin, then proceeds to slash at him with her batarangs. Batgirl decides to interrogate the other goon, who's busy accidentally shooting himself through the leg, trying to get his gun ready.
Stop, police! Stop!
When she asks where Kane is, he starts saying he never heard of him. So she breaks his wrist, alleviating him of his gun, and asks again, pressing the point of her harangue below his eye. The man again pleads that he doesn't know Kane, just works for a guy who works for a guy who works for a guy, and so on. She headbutts him, causing another inexplicable nasal blood explosion, then checks the shipping manifests. The name Armand Lester, likely an alias, doesn't mean much to her, but she leaves the goons tied up, knowing where to find answers. We cut to morning at Wayne Manor, where Alfred tells Bruce via Bluetooth that Cassandra's bed hasn't been slept in. Again. Bruce says she might have slept on the floor like she did growing up with Kane, but Alfred can't be certain, since she hasn't spent much time in the manor since her return and joining the Outsiders. She hasn't even personalized her room with posters, photos, or magazines. almost as if she doesn't think of the mansion as home.
She doesn't hog the TV, or raid the fridge, or play loud rock music to the annoyance of everyone else. It's a travesty, I tells ya!
Bruce thinks she just needs time, but Alfred says she needs more than that, to feel she belongs, and that isn't accomplished when the walls are adorned with photos of his other wards and not her. Even Jason Todd, the resurrected renegade that abandoned what Bruce taught him, is better represented in the manor than Cassie, and for that alone, Bruce needs a swift kick in the face. Alfie thinks that maybe, on some level, they always thought of her as being the monster David Cain's, instead of a troubled girl in need of love and acceptance. Bruce takes pause, then admits Alfred made some fair points, and says we're headed home. So either Robin's with him, or Bruce is messing with split personalities again. A splash page shows Batgirl overseeing the Batcave, and the many iconic trophies therein. She drops down, unmasks, and makes use of the Bat computer. She's not a detective, but she's learned a thing or two from bats, and runs a search for the name she's discovered. As she takes a printout and secures it within her belt, she admits to being hurt that she returned to the cave under secret circumstances, as well as trying to make up for what she'd done. However, she figures so long as it stays secret, there's no need to worry. Cue someone off-panel telling her to hold it right there.
I don't suppose the giant dinosaur is a larger version of that singing automated big mouth bass?
Nope, it's Nightwing, revealed on another splash page. A little unnecessary, given the other one was just 2 pages ago, but whatever. He wants to know what she's doing in the cave alone, since he knows she's on a proverbial short leash, despite being on his old team. You can tell she's been out solo, and again asks what she's doing, thinking maybe she took something she shouldn't have. He reaches out, only to be deflected. They pause, exchange glares, and then it's "Let's get ready to rumble" on a giant penny. Nightwing says that even though they know she's clean of the drugs Slade used to control her, and she passed a polygraph, she apparently killed a pharmaceutical executive after the Titans East fight, from Johns' Teen Titans run I mentioned earlier. News of Cassie killing someone after the Titans East fight took me by surprise, so it must have happened in a title I wasn't collecting. Unfortunately, they don't give a caption saying what title that was or what issue. Anyway, Nightwing adds that polygraphs can be faked, and says he's not sure that she's really back with them, and maybe Cassie isn't either. He goes on that though she can read body language like he can English, she isn't psychic, and all it'd take is one unexpected move and he'll have her. And that's when their argument is interrupted by Batman and Robin. We're family. No fighting among ourselves.
You're the Bat family. And according to science, bats actually argue a whole lot. Look it up. It's true.
Nightwing basically tattles on Cassandra, kind of like the older brother who sees a younger sibling doing something wrong and feels they're getting off, whereas he would have been grounded. Cassie says she can't stagnate in her room until getting a call to fight for the Dark Knight, and Bats agrees. But Nightwing thinks that Cass is suddenly dictating terms to him of all people, after everything she's done. Bats reminds him that she wasn't entirely responsible for what she did. Robin interjects that they don't know everything that happened yet, but they've been working with Cass to fill in some blanks. To be succinct, while Bruce, Tim, and Dick were on a year-long vacation after the Infinite Crisis, Cassie had returned from the Balkans, and she was going to protect Gotham while they were away, and also take ESL classes and tutelage from Alfred to improve her speech. Deathstroke, who couldn't take her hand-to-hand, hit her with a dart full of a drug that helped him manipulate her mind, convincing her to take a cell of the League of Assassins, thus starting her off a path her father always intended, the path of a killer.
Now you see that evil will always triumph, because good is dumb.
Cassie killed a few people, framed Robin for murder, and even tricked him into releasing her father from prison, so she could kill him. That didn't pan out. David Cain managed to escape, but when they later reunited, She was still under the influence of the drugs, so she agreed to be part of his little enterprise, namely an assassin shop. Cain would run it, Cassie would be second in command, and Deathstroke would be a silent partner, utilizing Cain's other daughters to act as killers for hire. David convinced Cassandra that she was still his favorite, and that kept her in line. She joined the Titans East under Deathstroke and faced the Teen Titans when Robin injected her with a counter serum that cleared her mind of the drugs, for the most part. Her mind was a bit hazy, and that led her to believe her father when he said he didn't know about Deathstroke's drugging, when in fact he was in on the whole plot. They went on to try and obtain a drug called Pheno, which would give metahuman powers to Cain's other assassin daughters. Cassie turned out to have been helping Robin investigating gangs using the drug, and for whatever reason ended up killing the pharmaceutical executive. Cain escaped with the drug, the scientists, and his daughters, but didn't think Cassie was ever coming back. Now with the drug completely out of her system, Cassie returned home to the mansion.
Whew. I know that was a lot of exposition, and some of it might seem convenient. But remember, this is to clean up someone's terrible idea that Cassie chose to be a villain of her own free will. A terrible character 180 that made zero sense on numerous levels. For all its clunkiness, it serves its purpose of undoing the incompetent decision to turn her evil while still acknowledging the related events still happened.
Nightwing still feels less than reassured given that a pinky promise and a couple of tests for the murder multiple times over somehow convince a guy that has files on eliminating the Justice League of America. Batman says what happened was because they weren't around, and they can't turn their backs on Cass again. Even though she's being watched, Dick isn't appeased that guilt is letting Batman give Cassie all access, especially with Cain still out there. Even though Pheno is too unstable to make super killers, Nightwing decides he's the only one with the right mindset to make sure Cain doesn't see his plans through. So he leaves. Batman tells Cass not to make him regret this, as he and Robin take their leave as well. Cass also heads out with the printout from the Bat computer.
There exists a criticism about Nightwing in this story that he's too harsh on Cassandra, too willing to accept that she might be compromised, knowingly or not. And it's a fair criticism, especially when you consider that some months after this story, he takes up the mantle of the Bat, and when Batwoman starts busting heads, he doesn't bat an eye. Pun. Anyway, I can also understand the alternative, why Grayson is more suspicious. He figures Cass should be held under more scrutiny, but seems to be literally getting away with murder. For purposes of the narrative, someone has to be the hard-nosed skeptic, and when dealing with Batman's kids, it's not too outlandish that it's the eldest brother that would find a deeper sense of responsibility in himself and thus almost feel insulted at what may appear to be leniency on a younger sibling.
It's the following night when Cassandra descends upon an abandoned school, the final lead connected to the name Armand Lester. As she enters the building, she tells herself she can feel Cain and Slade no longer control her, but she still feels bad for what she did, even if it wasn't of her own free will. She also feels bad for the pain she's going to cause the Bat family when her mission is done. Maybe they'll understand and let her stay, but probably not. She'd be alone again without a home or family or normality. But she sets that worry aside as her searches led her to the gymnasium. She slowly opens the door, finding a fresh pool of blood, and eventually several women in a multipod containment machine with their throats cut. Their killer is apparently familiar looking, as the black and red-garbed young woman notices her intruder. "Whoever you are, you just opened the wrong door."
Whoever? Pointy ears, cape, bat emblem. You sure you don't want to hazard a guess, lady? Tune in next time and we'll find out whoever she is. Hello, Angry Spork here, still taking issue with Batgirl Redemption Road. In the first installment, Cassandra had started her own secret investigation to find her father David and Deathstroke, the two men that had manipulated her into being the killer she never wanted to be. Her intention? To kill them. She clashed with Nightwing and was warned by Batman not to betray his trust. Continuing her investigation, she was led to an abandoned school where she found several dead bodies and the not-so-dead body that made them dead. And so, we continue.
Issue 2's cover asks, who is Marque? Well, with a black and red costume, that's biggest distinction is a bunch of lines. I'd wager Jim Lee's inspiration for all the New 52 redesigns. Marque realizes who she's dealing with, but isn't going to let that stop her. Batgirl makes her own realization, that Marque and the dead girls were all former pupils of Cain, and wonders if Marque killed the other 5 because the Phano drug had been perfected. The mystery woman attacks, slashing at the back of Batgirl's head, revealing some of her hair and leaving some blood behind. A jab to the face and some mouth blood convinces Marque that B-Girl was the one taught better than the rest, and as she tries to tell her she's not with Cain, they take the fight out a window, reminded of their first lesson. Trust is a ghost. You know, like the chapter title. Marque exposits that she was older than the others when Cain took her, but he never got in her head. She took his lessons, but waited for the chance to free herself, took on the name she currently uses, and in a flashback panel is next to a door wielding a paperclip, likely a nod to how she escaped. Batgirl tells her they have the same mission, but Marque disagrees. She spent her free from Cain time ruining the Great Grey Dragon, as shown in another flashback of her attempt to explode him. She's haunted him as he haunts her, and now, closer than she's ever been, she won't let another of his toys thwart her from stopping his deadliest plan yet. I am not a toy. Cassie knows there's only one surefire way to prove she's no longer with Cain. Using her cape, she restrains Marque's arm while cracking it at the same time, and tells her she could kill her 11 different ways, and that turns out to be sufficient evidence that she's on the up and up.
Why is it that when I attack people and break their bones to prove that I'm not lying, it doesn't work, they just call the police?
Well, nothing seems to be broken since Marque moves her arms well enough. She does think it's possible that Cassie set up a trap to figure out what she knows, but since they have the same teacher, letting the young assassin go is still a risk. Marque needs to know the target Cain and Slade are going to take out to establish their new business, and how far along they are, so she demands to use the Batcave's resources. Denied! Batgirl will find answers on her own, but she doesn't work for her uneasy ally. They're working together. Marque decides to use her own resources, and then they can meet again at the school the next night. Batgirl tells Marque no killing, but the young woman pretty much brushes her off. Cassie leaves, pondering the blood on the neck of her costume, which she doesn't think is hers, and we leave the scene on a very Deathstroke-esque shadow cast from within the school. Change angles and it'll turn out to be a squirrel. Later in the Batcave, our heroine is inserting her blood sample into the computer for analysis, while she downloads at-large threat files of her father and Slade to a thumb drive. Oracle chimes in, knowing what Cass is up to, even if Batman doesn't. Barb knows how difficult it'd be to stop Batgirl if she really wanted to kill her 2 targets, but begs her not to. It won't make her feel better.
Maybe not, but I bet a good old-fashioned savage beating would. Allow me to demonstrate. I just need a volunteer from the audience. Preferably Martin Shkreli.
Though her successor is silent, Barbara understands about needing to deal with things on one's own, and trusts her to make the right call. Cassie asks a favor, and Oracle agrees to analyze the blood work, but she'll only send the raw data. She even goes as far as erasing Batgirl's activity on the computer in a way bats won't notice, but that's as far as she'll go as long as the boss remains in the dark. Well, he is Batman, after all. Being in the dark is kind of his deal anyway, right? They'd all help her if it meant nobody got killed, but Cassandra is choosing to go at this alone. Later, Cass is at a coffee shop called How You Been, and between the green lettering and the curve of that steam question mark, I swear this is a front for the Riddler. She narrates that Oracle understands, even if she doesn't agree, perhaps having wondered if she'd ever kill the Joker. Cass wonders how she can't kill the men that turned her into a killer, as she looks over some incomplete files for both her father and Slade. One connection links them, a Klaus Josef Hannemeyer, and that's when she's surprised by someone calling her from off-panel. A lot of that going around lately. She shuts her laptop and knocks over her coffee, which is caught by Sal, a classmate from her ESL classes the previous year. He asks where she went when she suddenly stopped attending, and she only says that she got sick.
Which is true. She came down with a severe case of idiocy.
Sal works up the nerve to ask for her number, but Cassie doesn't have a phone. No problem, he gives her his and asks her to call before he leaves for Jakarta in a fortnight. Cue sitcom audience, woo! That night, Batgirl returns to the abandoned school, musing how Sal wanted her to call him, and that she likes his eyes. She hasn't felt this way since Zero.
Zero, for those who don't know, was a young man Cassie met while she was living in Bloodhaven, but he died, along with the rest of the city, when Chemo was dropped. Before that, she and Superboy were briefly an item, but he was pretty intimidated by her. But I'm sure this relationship will work out.
Well, hope and the odds make poor bedfellows.
Marque had interrogated a mercenary pilot who flew Cain to Kongala in 1975 to assassinate their president. He'd heard Slade may have been there too, but wasn't sure. She believed this uncertainty because she asked many times, she says, as she washes blood off her hands. Batgirl confirmed Slade was in Kongala at the same time, as the name she found belonged to a chemist who was also there, known for selling stimulants to mercenaries, and he currently resides in a Gotham prison nursing home. Mark's ready to go question the old man, but Batgirl stops her, asking if she killed the pilot, to which our uneasy ally says she doesn't want that answer. Batgirl tells her not to kill the old man as he's paying for his crimes, but Marque thinks differently as he hasn't paid her. No one but Cain and Slade need die, according to the crime fighter, but Marque says they have different definitions for need. And somehow I doubt a trip to dictionary.com would settle this particular argument. We jump to the Narrows Island Federal Penitentiary, where an orderly is almost killed by Marque before Batgirl stops her. One disabled camera and a picked lock later, they're face to back with Hannemeyer, who starts rambling about a woman named Ilsa and the beauty of the moonlight. When asked about Cain and Slade, he seems confused, and Marque thinks he's pretending. Believing he's simply old, Batgirl coaxes him further about Kongala. The aged chemist says that after a bomb killed that land's president, Slade called him for transport out, and mentioned that he encountered another killer claiming credit for the president's death, another customer of Hannemeyer's, David Cain. They battled each other over the bounty, with a mutual respect resulting from the fight we don't quite get to see until the sound of police sirens made them call it off, each man measuring his career against the other.
I know it's not that important to the story, but who got the bounty?
Hannemeyer mentions having spoken with Slade, holding up a piece of paper as he mentions the killer asked him to work on stabilizing a formula for him. When asked if he was successful, he begins talking about Ilsa again, so the two young women leave, believing his mind has checked out. I can't tell if they took the paper with them, if it was significant, or if the old dude kept it. Could have been clearer. A couple panels of empty glaring at the sky, Hannemeyer's disposition changes, and he presses a call button summoning the orderly that Marque almost killed. The chemist asks to speak to his daughter and becomes increasingly insistent and loud to do so immediately. The orderly acquiesces so he doesn't wake the entire ward, and when given a phone, he tells an old friend that they're coming for you. Hey man, you need to be your daughter's parent, not her friend. Returning to the old school, Marque says they need to assume the compound was stabilized, and Cain and Slade now have their army. Batgirl notices the broken glass from their earlier fight is cleared from the ground, and before either can react, they're struck by electricity. Someone off-panel calls it clumsy, and a splash page shows a familiar orange boot and the business end of a sword. The newcomer asks, "What would Daddy say?"
Probably go for the jugular. Well, tune in next time to see if that boot really is who we think it is. Hello, Angry Spork here, still taking issue with Batgirl Redemption Road. In the last issue, Cassie came across Marque, another young woman who had been trained by David Cain. They both shared a desire for revenge, and after some fighting and some separate investigation, found an old man who could give them some information which they more or less got. When they returned to their meeting place to consider their options, they were tasered into submission by someone in familiar orange boots.
Issue 3 starts off with a first-person perspective of Cassandra Cain, dreaming of her adoptive and biological families sort of merged into one. It starts off pleasant enough, where Alfred, Lady Shiva, Tim Drake, and Dick Grayson welcome her home to Wayne Manor, though it takes a bit of a 180 turn when she's told to go meet with her dad, Bruce Cain, someone who's chastising her for an alleged murder. The figure steps out of the shadows and looks just like David Cain, her biological father, but suddenly changes to look like Batman. He demands that Cassie start talking, but she can't. Anytime she tries, it's just a word bubble with a blip. This dream imagery is actually really well done, especially for Cassandra. It has the idyllic elements of a normal family she's always wanted, but peppered with the reality of where she came from and what she's done. It all concludes with the opposing father figures in her life and her inability to speak or stand up for herself. That could also mean that she really doesn't know what she would say in the event she does carry out her mission to kill both her father and Deathstroke. Cassandra awakes in the school gym to find herself and Marque captives of Rose Wilson, aka the Ravager. She has a sword to each of their necks, threatening to gut them if they don't tell her where she can find her father, Slade Wilson, Deathstroke the Terminator.
Hey, weren't there about 5 dead would-be assassins there last issue? There's no sign that after a night or two that the police have been called to come clean anything up. So, what happened to the bodies?
Marque and Ravager have a bit of a back and forth that amounts to, "My assassin mentor was better than your assassin mentor." Rose turns her attention to Batgirl, who is secretly working on her wrist restraints. Despite how Deathstroke manipulated Cassandra's mind, he is still Ravager's dad and thus hers to kill. She's spent every free moment away from the Teen Titans looking for her father, and that investigation has brought her to the school and the 2 young women before her. Given they have the same targets, Batgirl suggests they work together, but Marque is a bit disagreeable. Fortunately, Batgirl just tells her to be quiet. When told of the army their dads intend to build with the super killers, Ravager begins to release Marque, saying at the very least they'll make good distractions. Batgirl's already freed herself because you're dang right she has, and Rose demands to know what they know. She and Marque fail to impress each other with death threats, and Batgirl brings them back on point. When Hannemeyer's name is mentioned, Ravager has an epiphany, noting that the so-called senile old fool is an even better actor than he is a chemist. When they exit the school, at Ravager's discretion, they find 3 armed, similarly clad, masked women waiting for them on a splash page.
Do you think we could distract them with the old, "Hey, how embarrassing, you're all wearing the same outfit" routine?
In Platinum Flats, Barbara Gordon is analyzing the blood sample she got from Cassandra the previous issue, pondering if she was too easy on her young friend. She knows there's a need to confront the men who had wronged her and would want the same thing if their positions were flipped, but she was trained by Commissioner Gordon, her father, and Batman not to cross a certain line. I'm guessing she's either talking about killing or those velvet ropes at museums. Barb wonders if, given how Cassie was raised, she'll make the right choice. She hears an argument behind her and finds Nightwing restraining Misfit, who, if you recall, was Batgirl herself, for all of 5 minutes. Grayson's not there for a social call, however. He says there's a missing 14-minute section of the Bat computer's log. marked as idle cycling, which is something it doesn't do. Batman would only notice if he were looking for it, so Nightwing suspects this has something to do with Batgirl. Speaking of, we jump back to her, Marque, and Ravager at the abandoned school, where they leap from their new opponents, and we see a silhouette of Cassie facing the nunchuck user of the group on a rooftop.
One leap and they're on a rooftop? Are they Power Rangers? Does Cassie get a Megazord?
Cassie realizes that these must be her sisters, and this situation feels about as unfair as the rest of her life. Her opponent is stronger and faster, but her moves are still like Cassie's own. These assassins aren't given names, so here are some funny ones for kicks and giggles. Speary Agnew tries to get into Rose's head by belittling her skills, but it doesn't work, though she proves to be more than a physical match. Meanwhile, Lady Whippet from the clan Devo boasts physical superiority thanks to the Pheno drug and seems to get the upper hand on Marque. In an interesting maneuver, it looks like Chuckarette leaps over Batgirl, throwing her over her head, but our heroine uses that force to land an attack on Speary Agnew, thus aiding Rose and letting them switch opponents. And I really like that shot of them side by side ready for battle. A bit more fighting and they subdued their opponents, with Batgirl stopping Rose from enacting some sword-related payback, as they've been hurt enough, probably just by losing. Marque, ever the disagreeable one, holds each assassin by the chin and snaps their necks in one fell swoop.
We said no killing. You said no killing.
The Crimson Crossword costumed killer assures her associates that she was smart enough to knock out her opponent and tie her up with her own whip, only to see that whip and no assassin. Womp 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 womp. Ravager's ticked that they don't have someone to interrogate, but Marque reminds her that now they have someone they can track to her base of operation, and they proceed to do so. Though I find it odd that a trained killer would leave their weapon behind, not because it leaves them unarmed, but also because it's a clue to people who are inevitably going to follow her.
Son, you are dumber than a bowl of mice.
I guess Cassie really was trained better than the rest of them. We briefly check back in with Oracle, who admits to Nightwing that, yeah, she helped Batgirl. She didn't give her any information, not that she had anything new on Cain or Slade, but she would promise not to tell Batman about her computer activities. Nightwing suggests that Barbara gave her help without really realizing that Cassie's life was in as much danger as the two men she had targeted. When countered with what Batgirl had taken from her, Grayson reminds her that they all got into this business because of something taken from them, and that doesn't make them judge, jury, and executioner, and it certainly doesn't allow them to put other people's lives at risk. He leaves, and both Misfit and an angry Oracle aren't so sure he'll be making any future social visits.
He'll get over it as soon as he's written by someone else.
Our triad of revenge seekers are in an alley, noting that their escaped quarry has stopped covering her tracks, or is leading them into a trap, one that Rose preemptively blames Marque let be set up by wasting time killing the two they had under control. The girl whose costume is New 52 before the New 52 was a thing, holds Ravager's swords at bay, saying that the ones she killed were about to counterstrike. Rose tears off Marque's left glove, revealing a pattern of scars on her arm, which Cass seems to think are self-inflicted, and more may be added soon. And somewhere Victor Zsasz is sensing a kindred spirit. They stop at a building they're certain the stray assassins stopped at. Cassandra narrates that it seems if Marque can't kill Cain, she's willing to die trying, and wonders if she can make a life without having Cain there to kill. And she asks the same questions about herself. Scaling the fire escape and peering inside, they find more girls, in attire similar in style to the ones that tried to kill them earlier. They're all working out and training, and don't seem to see our trio. There doesn't seem to be any sign of their targets inside the building, but splashed on the final page, Deathstroke watches from the building behind them.
Oh no, that's not Deathstroke. I'm not falling for another fake-out like last issue. Tune in next time to see if the next issue proves my paranoia. Angry Spork here, still taking issue with Batgirl Redemption Road. Ravager, aka Rose Wilson, Deathstroke's daughter, joins Marque and Batgirl's patricide club when they are beset by 3 other daughters of David Cain, set out to kill them. While Nightwing and Oracle argue over Oracle covering Batgirl's tracks on the Bat computer, Marque manages to snap the necks of 2 of the assassins, letting the 3rd one go. Our trio follows her to a warehouse where even more assassins are training, and one assassin lies in wait behind them.
Issue 4 sees the trio watching through a window as Batgirl quickly refreshes the story points and Deathstroke hooks the roof with a grapple. As Cassie laments how her sort-of sisters would rather kill her than accept her aid, she detects Slade just before impact and dodges him. Marque and Ravager, no such luck. They're soon surrounded by Cain and Slade's intended army, Cassie narrating she could have ended up like any one of them, Rose squaring off against her father, and Marque is generally ready to rumble. While Rose seeks revenge on her father for those he has hurt, including her brother Joey, Batgirl tries to let her foes take each other out as much as possible, shown by one killer shooting her comrade in the leg by mistake. But Cass still feels guilty about it, and that seems to distract her enough to fall prey to a bolo.
Careful, Cassie. Feeling guilty about everything is Spider-Man's deal. You don't want a lawsuit on your hands.
Marque busies herself by slashing at her opponents, be it the neck or the shoulder. Wait, no, that's a neck shot too. When one girl restrains her with a chain, asking why she'd want to hurt their father when she and Batgirl are like them. The difference, Marque says, is that her eyes are open, and she presses backward, forcing the girl holding her to be run through by a sword wielder behind her. Ouch! Deathstroke takes to mind games by telling Rose that she's wearing a knockoff of his gear and she joined a team he's frequently beaten and effectively built a dream home in his shadow. Not considering that such a home would be cool in the summertime, Ravager loses it and attacks, only for Daddy Dearest to deflect, knocking her into some dumbbells. He says he kept thinking she'd return to him, but now believes it'd be best to simply kill her. An assassin readies a kind of spiky knuckle-duster about to strike Batgirl, and saying she never deserved Cain as a father. Using her glove fins to unbolo herself, B-Girl agrees, knocking her opponent out, while saying that they all deserved better. Cass then turns her attention to Slade for some payback, knocking him into a rack of hand weights. Deathstroke notes that, much like his own daughter, there are only 2 ways to beat someone like Batgirl. From a distance, recalling the dart he used to poison her, earning a snarl from the crime fighter, or getting in her head and making her emotional. He's been in her head so long as it is, he can strike her jaw and gut with the ample assortment of hand weights.
What's making that weird bong sound effect? If it's the weight, then it seems kind of rubbery and hollow. If it's Cassie's stomach, what's her diet like?
After throat-slashing another assassin, Marque grapples with one more with a knife of her own. To prove how dedicated she is to wiping every last trace of David Cain from the earth, Marque guides her foe's knife into her own gut, leaving the opponent surprised enough to fall to a fatal strike. You know, she enjoys killing too much.
Where to begin? Eeny, meeny, miny, kill!
Cassandra, meanwhile, is wondering what facing her father will be like if Deathstroke can get into her head, as she slams old One-Eye's face into the wall. The impact reveals the walls are lined with explosives, so I guess the cover was what they had left over. Slade decides the risk of total exposure is too great, and though one of the killer girls objects, he chooses the, shall we say, expeditious route for the sake of the bigger picture. Ravager, Batgirl, and Marque narrowly escape the explosion, taking refuge behind a car as the building crumbles. In the aftermath, they take in the awful sight, which Marque of course finds beautiful since no one could have survived. Rose notes that her father's been through the whole destroyed building falling on him shtick before, and leaves to find him despite objections, as she doesn't care about Cain. She remarks that Batgirl should be able to understand that kind of focus. Marque thinks the Titan was only slowing them down, and scars her arm further for the night's score.
Eesh. I don't even want to know how she keeps scoring bowling.
Batgirl chides her, saying this isn't a game or about scores, but Marque reminds that it is about getting even, i.e. settling the score, which isn't entirely inaccurate. Their mission is all about killing, even if it does center on one guy. She takes off on her own, promising to kill her former ally if she gets in her way. Cass is too injured to stop her, observed from a distance by an unmasked Deathstroke. He tells David Cain over communications about the trio's split, and that he at least has Batgirl to worry about, but Slade himself is out. Cain isn't pleased about the majority of his army being destroyed, especially since he told potential investors that they were to cripple the meta-hero community in 2 days to launch their assassin firm. A typical advertising stunt, but with slightly more bloodshed, I guess. As it is, there aren't enough girls to make that a certainty. Slade tells David that he should have supervised the relocation, and there was no choice but to use the explosives. If he wants to make good on his promises, he'll have to do it himself. Cassandra is seen in a dark corner, listening in through newly developed micro-mics that she's certain Batman would be upset by her using for her clandestine mission. There is a panel likely flashing back to a time when she did throw the devices, but there's little context as to when she did so. Bit of a hiccup there. They have a short range and are unable to trace, but instead of trying to follow Slade, she refocuses on her father, hitting a switch on her belt to fry the mics to avoid being found. Though I imagine Slade will figure something's amiss when he detects the distinct aroma of burning electronics.
Did someone just fart? Cyborg.
Later in the Batcave, Cassandra bandages herself up, expecting her father to carry out the impending assassination himself to secure investors for his murderous firm and rebuild his army later. The one remaining question is the target, someone whose death would affect all heroes. Batman's a possibility, as he's connected to just about everyone somehow. However, the possibilities are many, so she decides to think on it for a spell and looks at her cell phone, just like a teenager, am I right? The following splash page shows her back at the coffee shop How You Been, and I swear I'm on to you, Edward Nygma. Her narration bounces between the possibility of someone being laid and not liking her to her father's plans. She remembers that Deathstroke said the death would affect all meta-heroes, and something about relocation. And oh, hey look, Watchmen reference, right behind her. She ponders calling again, but decides against it, not wanting to appear needy or desperate. Just as she's refocusing on who the target could be, Sal arrives, setting down his backpack, and glad that Cassandra called him. Since their last meeting, Sal had apparently returned to the shop about 3 times in hopes of seeing her again. Now who seems desperate? He asks about her bruises, and Cass waves them off as being from kickboxing. Because it's such a great way to relieve stress and anger, Sal mentions he used to be pretty angry as a kid. It all relates back to when he was 6 in Jakarta, and his dad was beaten to death at a political rally by government troops. It left him mute for 7 years, but boxing and moving out of Indonesia helped him deal with the experience.
Yeah, that's the way to win the girl over. First date, reveal the traumatic death of a parent. Second date, show off your collection of tattered sun hats you found at the dump.
Sal admits it's not the best story to tell someone he barely knows. Shocker. But feels like Cassandra would understand. She says she does, and that's when her phone chimes, so Sal goes to get a drink, promising happier conversations upon return. The call is from Oracle, saying she's sending Cassie the raw data of the blood sample given to her in issue 2. There were enough similarities in the DNA that Barb thought the blood was Cassandra's, but then Cassie realizes it was actually Marque's. Before our heroine can process this news, she has a revelation. Whose death would cripple the meta-hero community, and what Slade meant by relocation. As Barbara tries to mention Nightwing's visit, Cass ends the call as Sal returns, and says she has to leave. He asks if he can help, or if it's something he'd understand. And Cassandra plants him with a kiss, thanking him and assuring she'll call, but she has to get going. 2 platinum flats. Cassie is determined that Oracle is the intended target. She feels she should have mentioned something when Barbara called, but she needs her to be bait for her father.
And that questionable bit of ethics is where we're leaving off for now. So tune in next time to find out just how far Batgirl's willing to go for revenge, how Batman intends to stop her, and how many more digs can I take at Dan Didio? Angry Spork here with yet another installment of Taking Issue with Batgirl Redemption Road. A fight between Batgirl, Ravager, and Marque against an army of David Cain's assassin daughters wasn't quite going the way Deathstroke wanted, so he blew the building up with the army inside. Such a wacky so-and-so. The trio managed to survive, but ended up going their own ways. Cassie, through listening devices, managed to pick up a conversation between Deathstroke and David Cain, her father, and he was none too happy to hear his army was gone. To put their killer-for-hire business on the map, he would have to kill their next target himself. And Cassie eventually put the pieces together and found out just who that target was. Oracle.
Issue 5's cover kinda looks like Nightwing, Batman, and Robin are trying to get Batgirl to go to the dentist, and she really doesn't want to go. It actually starts with Nightwing keeping Batgirl from entering the Batwing, despite Bats thinking he's paranoid, which sounds super ironic when you think about it. Grayson isn't letting Cass fly off after everything that's happened. She doesn't really let him decide, though, kicking him off and launching the plane out of the cave intent on killing her dad before he kills Barbara, thus completing her secret mission and letting Batman and the others decide what to do with her afterwards. Nightwing's hitched a ride, though, and breaks through the glass with an Eskrima stick. After some swerving, Cass manages to loosen his grip on the wing, and he falls. Deploying a parachute, he calls Batman, telling him what's happened, and that despite the beacons on the plane, he planted a mini-tracker on Cassandra.
You knew he had a chute ready to go, right, Cassie? Right?
We see Nightwing's tracker tossed from the plane, and Batgirl narrating that he was right not to trust her given what he knows about Deathstroke and her father. She continues, later, how Dick may think she's under their influence, but it's really all about a mission no one else can share. And that is when Batman orders her to land, piloting a much bigger plane, while Robin reminds him that they don't know the whole story. They try to force Batgirl to land, but her smaller plane is also quicker, and she maneuvers behind them using the Batwing's weapons to disable one of the larger plane's wings. Heck of a thing to build into your plane when you hate guns. The dynamic duo have a rough landing as their ally takes off, Tim pointing out that the shots weren't meant to kill, but Bruce seems to have had enough of making excuses for Cassie. Manning Bat ATVs, or BATVs, or BATVs, whatever, they follow by land, heading west after the Batwing's beacon. It's not long before they're just outside Las Vegas, and Tim cracks that she might be going to see Blue Man Group, a joke that Batman doesn't much care for at the moment. They locate the Batwing in the distance, Batman telling his sidekick to stay awake in case she's hiding, but I guess he was planning to nap while searching the plane. Anyway, she's long gone, so they send the plane back to the cave on remote, intending to pick up her trail in Vegas. What they don't notice is a civilian-clothed Cassie on the bus they pass, headed for Platinum Flats.
Oh, Cassandra. You've fallen so far you've resorted to public transportation.
Cassandra arrives at her destination in the neighboring state of California, so imagine it's been a few hours. The hit on Oracle is happening that night, so after reiterating that her dad will be forced to do the hit himself, she intends to wait for Cain to arrive. She walks into a building owned by, and the new base for, the Birds of Prey, called Clock Tower Systems.
Save the Clock Tower Systems! Save the Clock Tower Systems!
She sees Barbara and Charlotte Gaige-Radcliffe, aka Misfit, but avoids contact, not wanting to compromise the lure for Cain. Based on how well she knows Babs, Cassie figures the building has several security measures, like a special magnetic key card for the top floor and sensors to detect tampering with cables. Other floors aren't quite set up yet, but Cain would likely have to assume they are. The floor below is possible, but risks exposure. The stairs don't access Oracle's floor, just go straight to the roof. The only other option is from a distance. Cassie hits the roof of a neighboring building, noting that her dad will want to see a body, so he won't use explosives that would hinder that kind of confirmation. She pinpoints the kitchen, where Barbara would have to go sooner or later, and in full view to confirm a kill.
Here's looking at you, deduced murder scenario.
Back at ground level, a fatigued Cassie contemplates what will be left for her after Cain's death. Dark clouds gather in the sky as she sees Marque across the street. They share a mission, but only Cassandra is concerned about who would get hurt in seeing it through. She tries to talk, but Marque isn't interested. As it begins to rain, Cassie implies that they could fight out in the open where Cain would see, or somewhere more private. Marque follows her into an alley where she's greeted by two surprise punches, Cassie's fist, and the fact that they're sisters according to a blood test. Probably should have just stuck with the thing about the blood, but hey, that's me. And at no point is it asked or explained how the angry red hashtag here knew enough of the same details as Cassie about Cain's target to have this impromptu meeting at all. As a sister, Cassandra wants to deal with Cain for the both of them, but Marque isn't entirely convinced of their blood relation. She sees Cassie as less a sister and more in her way, exemplified when Marque throws a knife at her.
These two remind me of my nieces, in that I wouldn't be surprised if a certain one of them threw a knife at someone's head.
Cass catches both the knife and a kick to the face, preferring if they could just be a family. Marque knocks her down and walks away, leaving her vulnerable to a slash at her Achilles tendons. Ow!
You'll walk again.
Well, not on her tiptoes she won't. Cassie says she's going to finish business with Cain and then return to help Marque, who tells her not to bother. She's not found a sister, only made an enemy,
now and forever.
That hurt here and here.
While a painful turn of events for Cassie, she still has her mission. A series of panels show David Cain assemble a sniper rifle, looking through the scope and finding his target, Barbara Gordon. His view is suddenly obstructed by Batgirl, standing before him on a splash page as thunder roars in the background.
Really good timing.
Quick question. Have you two tried family counseling? Well, tune in next time to see if they do that or just punch each other. My money's on the punching. The uneasy alliances, the hidden secrets, and even fighting with her closest allies has all brought Cassie Cain face to face with her father, David. As he was poised to assassinate Barbara Gordon, aka Oracle, and cripple the superhero community, she stands in his way with the sole purpose of breaking her non-killing oath and ending his life. I'm Angry Spork, and we are taking issue with the final chapter of Batgirl, Redemption Road.
Issue 6 wastes no time in picking up where the last one left off, this time Cain cracking that it's too much to expect his daughter is there to help him. Cassie tells him of her deadly intent, while trying to think of the great gray dragon as the enemy, not her father. A shot is fired, but fortunately only hits the window frame. Barbara tells Charlie to get down and calls the Batcave, getting Nightwing. Since he's hours away in Gotham, he asks if there are any birds of prey in the area, but there aren't. He instructs Babs to get to the most secure part of the building and consider both David and Cassie a threat, even though she sees them fighting. As Grayson is about to send an all points to Capes for assistance, Batman chimes in, belaying the order, and with he and Robin close, they'll be handling this in the family. Nightwing doesn't take it well. The daddy-daughter dance of doom rages on, Cain taunting Batgirl and tossing some throwing blades her way. She avoids all but one, deflecting it back and cutting Cain's face. He boasts that she can't be played, she's a big girl now, and takes a kick to the face, only to grab Cass by the ankle. Pressing his advantage, he talks about how bothered he always was that Cass didn't turn out the way he wanted, that unlike the failed children before her, he covered all the variables, like genetics and non-linguistics, then claims she was simply an odd mixture of weak and stubborn. She'd spent so much time trying to deny what she was bred to be, but all it took was some drugging and whispered suggestions, and she turned back to killing quickly enough. After all she's done, though, costing him his army and his plans with Slade, Cassandra has proven to be too much trouble, and as much as it hurts Cain, he's going to put her down.
Well, he said it would hurt him. That's something?
Batgirl sweep kicks him off his feet and deflects his acid capsules, saying she's not weak, only making choices he never gave her. In that same vein, as she knocks away his knife and dodges gunfire, she's choosing to end Cain's life so he'll never kill or poison anyone else. After cracking his wrist and, I think, breaking a couple of fingers. Cass says everything he taught her is being used against him to balance out what he did to her and not caring what happens to herself afterwards. Cain notes that despite his possible death, he will always be a part of her. He recalls when she was 5 and he took her along to his killing of a diplomat and his family, and she couldn't turn away. Just like she'll always have his eyes, she'll always have the taste for the work. Cass recalls it a little differently, though. She remembers a child's book that caught her interest, as well as some toys she'd never known before. She wanted to know, but Cain slapped the book out of her hand, letting her know and see only what he wanted. Batgirl is momentarily distracted, allowing David to strike with an escrima-stick, saying without the total focus he could have given her had she not run away, she's nothing but a whiny, ungrateful brat that does nothing but take and take.
That's not true. She does a lot of giving, thank you very much. She gives concussions. She gives broken bones. She gives nightmares to Gotham muggers.
Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Charlie has had enough of watching the fighting and intends to join, but Barb stops her. Despite Misfit's skills, Cain still outmatches her, and she could be easily used to make Batgirl more vulnerable and get them both killed. She instructs her charge to make sure Cain didn't sabotage the building, and Charlie complies, teleporting in a smokescreen, though letting it be known how much this situation sucks. Barbara agrees, but adds it's Batgirl's fight.
Not that this is a knock against this scene, as we should know why it is a girl with some super strength and teleporting abilities isn't joining in, but I think maybe it would have been better placed right before Cain flashes back to that assassination Heath brought 5-year-old Cassandra to, largely because it sort of inhibits the flow of this next scene.
Seemingly at Cain's mercy, Batgirl questions his self-awareness, screaming about a little girl that's ruined him.
Do you know what you sound like? A whiny little brat.
Enraged, the Grey Dragon readies a devastating strike, only for his daughter to give him a right hook, throwing back at him his remark about weakness and lack of focus. She says he never wanted her to have anything, not caring what she wanted. She smacks him around, saying she wanted to read, to talk, have a father and a family, somewhere to belong, in an emotionally powerful unleashing of her pent-up anger. A battered Cain tries to speak, but Batgirl kicks him back, sending him over the edge and leaving him hanging by one hand. She hovers her foot over his fingers, telling herself she wanted this chance. But she steps back, knowing that the pain would only get worse and never go away if she went through with it. As Cain weakly admits defeat and asks to be taken to jail, Cass begins wondering if pain is just how her life is supposed to be. She can't bring herself to pull him up. Taking the Batman Begins route, she determined that letting him fall isn't killing him, just choosing not to save him. He could die, or he could save himself, so she could lock him up. But she knows he can't save himself. She claims she can live with that, but at the last moment, as Cain loses his grip, she dives to try and grab him.
Unsuspense es killings me!
Batman has secured a very much not dead David Cain on the ledge below. And you know what? Given the perspective of the ledge to Cassie and all that, the distance doesn't quite look like it could have killed Cain, even if Batman wasn't there to save him. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Moving on, Cassie pleads that she tried to save him, and she's backed up by Robin, who had seen her attempt at a rescue. Cassie says that she waited, probably beginning to say that she should have acted sooner, but Tim says that after all Cain did to her, the fact that she moved at all was impressive, to Batman's agreement. In the end, not only did she choose not to kill Cain, she even tried to save him. And as far as the Dark Knight is concerned, Cassie is free of the worst of Cain's teachings.
He probably means the killing stuff. I mean, brutally injuring people to the point that they're incapacitated and in great pain, that's fine, but the killing stuff is where you gotta draw the line, people.
Batman says he knows that Batgirl doesn't feel like the mission is over, which is how the rest of the family feels. The mission never ends, but each criminal she stops and each life saved is a step closer. She stopped some of the many killers her father taught, and more remain at large. Robin radios Oracle that everything's clear, but that something's about to happen that Nightwing's not going to like.
Maybe not, but he has a lot worse coming a few years after this, like his costume being redesigned to resemble Chris O'Donnell's suit in Batman and Robin. Way to go, Jim Lee.
Bat says it's Cassie's call if she wants to continue to clean up her father's mess, but it's also her call if she will let him do something he should have done a long time ago. Specifically, when they get back to Gotham, Bruce wants to start adoption proceedings. To Cassie's noticeable elation. She's one of the family, and Batman should have let her know a lot sooner. He wants to make sure, as we end on a splash page, that she has a real family as long as he's around. Robin watches as they hug, and no one is suspicious that Bruce's shadow looks like a promo for Batman R.I.P.
And that is Batgirl Redemption Road. It might seem a little hypocritical that Cassie was so angry about being brainwashed into a killer that once returned to normal, she'd willingly kill someone, but to have her come back and not be so angry is kind of questionable in and of itself, isn't it? At least here we have a good build-up to her ultimate choice, and even though it could have ended in a disaster, she naturally chose correctly. You could say it was lucky that Batman was there, but remember what he said, that what happened to Cassie was because they weren't there. And here, he averts tragedy by being there for her. And more than that, he officially decides to adopt her and solidify her place within the Bat family.
There are some head-scratchers, like I've mentioned, such as what happened to the bodies of those girls Marque killed at the end of issue 1, or Nightwing's demeanor towards Cassie. It does repeat story points, but briefly so, as a nice refresher, and while there are several splash pages, most of them are done properly for establishing shots or for the sake of drama, or in the case of the last page, emotion. And there are some bigger nitpicks, like the retcon of Cain having taken Cass with him on a killing when she was 5, about 3 years before her own first kill. It's a bit of a continuity hiccup since it was killing someone and seeing what the body goes through when dying that changed her mind on the subject. Did that just not kick in at 5 years old, or because she didn't do it herself? Beyond that, there was a missed opportunity with Nightwing. Not only could he have started to accept Cassie was trustworthy again, he could have found common ground with her. He was a party to the death of a particularly powerful enemy of his own, known as Blockbuster, and it haunted him for a while, even though someone else forced him to pull the trigger. Granted, evil Cass has a higher body count, but at some point it would have been nice for Grayson to resolve his feelings by bonding with his little sister on this grim subject.
This story has even more elements I would have liked to have seen expanded upon, but they never were. Not in any comics I was reading, and nothing in any research I had done. Cassandra's adoption. No one talks about her like she's Bruce's daughter. We never see 1 or 2 panels of Bruce filling out adoption paperwork. He disappears after this, and after that, because of that, Cassandra passes the Batgirl mantle onto Stephanie Brown, and we barely see her again. She becomes Black Bat, which was great, but we still barely ever see her. That's atrocious for a Cassandra Cain fan like myself. Then there's Marque. She's Cassie's half-sister, her darker mirror image. What was her life like? Why did Cain choose her mother, and who was her mother? Then you have Sal. Why did that relationship end? Did it end? Did it end mutually? Did Cassie just go to China for a while without talking to him again? We never see or hear of him ever again after this story. He doesn't even show up after issue 4. But these elements are things that could have made such great stories for Cassie Cain fans, but they would need the right writer, which I think DC has a large embargo on these days.
To delve a little further, perhaps this story wasn't just about redeeming Cassie, but also writer Adam Beechin. When I started this review, I mentioned that he got a lot of flack for Cassandra's turn, when in truth, he was ordered to do it by higher-ups. He admits to the missteps in explaining the concept, but it was still a bad concept that nobody liked regardless of how it was told. There are a lot of ways you could tell someone their house burnt down, but that doesn't change the damage done, or that it was a stupid order given by someone being some combination of petty or incompetent. Even when reading Robin at the time, I felt something was off. Too much was good, and the terrible turn by Cassie, regardless of explanation, didn't seem to fit. After the fiasco that was Joe Quesada's imbecilic one more day, I figured there had to be someone above Beechen's head insisting on my favorite Batgirl turning evil for no reason. It would be a few years before that was confirmed. Along that line, maybe Nightwing's distrust of Batgirl was akin to the fandom's condemnation of Adam Beechen, and Robin insisting on knowing the whole story is a hint to the intricacies of the comic book industry, and how the story behind an event or change readers don't like isn't fully known to them. But Bats does eventually tell Robin they need to stop making excuses for Cassie, which may allude to those kinds of fans that don't care about facts or context behind the scenes and just want the problem resolved. But hey, maybe I'm just reading too much into it.
When all is said and done, this is a good story with a few problems here or there that serves the purpose of clearing Cassandra Cain of the editorially mandated turn to evil, as well as giving her an understandable thirst for revenge to move the story along. The thing to keep in mind is that when they turned her evil, they had no plan to turn her back. It was a stupid retcon because someone didn't know what the heck they were doing. And so we needed another retcon. And when you try to retcon a retcon, problems are going to happen. But on the plus side, it brought Cassie back to the butt-kicking Batgirl we all knew and loved.